Hello, everyone. I'm Bill Squadron, President of Our Energy Policy, and thank you for joining us today for our webinar on the future of aviation fuels. We have an outstanding panel. We'll be discussing this topic in just a couple of minutes. First of all, I do want to thank our co-host BP today, as well as all of Our Energy Policy's partners and supporters. Questions. So be sure to put your questions in writing, and we will get to as many of them as we possibly can before the end of the hour. The other thing I'd like to make sure you're aware of is Our Energy Policy's resource library. It's available to everyone in the energy community doing work on different issues. It's the most extensive library of documents, papers, reports, studies, etc. That is well curated, and it features this week, because of our webinar, some very interesting materials on the topic of aviation fuel. So I'd encourage all of you after the webinar, if you want to continue to look at this topic, please visit our resource library on the Our Energy Policy website and take advantage of the materials there. So I am going to turn it over now to our outstanding panel, and our moderator. We're very privileged today to have Kathy Bergren moderating this discussion. Kathy is the Director of Federal Government Relations for GEVO. She was formerly the Director of Public Policy for Renewable Fuels at the National Corn Growers Association. Also worked on Capitol Hill for many years. So Kathy is going to take it from here, and I'm sure we're going to have an outstanding discussion. Thanks to all of you for joining us. Kathy?
Thank you so much, Bill. Yeah, looking forward to the discussion today. You know, I think before we get started, we'll have each of the panelists just introduce themselves briefly so we can get right into the discussion. But Tom, if you want to kick off the introductions briefly, that would be great.
Thanks, Kathy. I'm Tom Michels. I'm with United Airlines, and I'm in our Government Affairs Department, but I work very closely with our sustainability team, and I've been working on energy and sustainability issues for 25 years now, which is shocking to say.
Great. Thanks, Tom. Chuck?
Thanks so much, Kathy. Good afternoon. Chuck Chaitovitz, Vice President for Environmental Affairs and Sustainability at the U.S. Chamber. My portfolio is everything environment, sustainability, and agriculture. And so there's a good intersection there between that and sustainable aviation fuels.
And Valerie.
Hi, I'm Valerie Reed. I'm the Director for the Bioenergy Technologies Office in the Department of Energy's Office of Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy. We focus on use of biomass and waste resources to produce biofuels and bio-based products, and I've been doing this for 30 years.
Great. So we have a very well-versed panel today, which is fantastic. You know, I think we'll maybe just start with some level setting on where we currently stand with domestic SAF production. Valerie, DOE has led federal efforts on a comprehensive strategy for scaling SAF production through the SAF Grand Challenge, most recently kind of tracking that progress and different metrics with the progress report that came out, you know, towards the end of last year, and that Pathways to Commercial Liftoff report. Could you summarize, you know, some of the progress that DOE is seeing in terms of momentum for SAF production?
Absolutely. As you may be aware, we announced the SAF Grand Challenge in September of 2021. So just to level set on the time frame of this government effort, the liftoff report was published in November of 2024. So the data collected there shows what has happened over that time. Some of the key points there are that it is still well understood that if decarbonization is the goal, the only near-term option, and maybe the only option at all, is sustainable aviation fuel. That is because it can be used as a drop-in fuel to produce lower greenhouse gas emissions, but it will be used in the existing fleets. So there's no need to necessarily invest in advanced aircraft technology. That can come over time, but SAF is the near-term priority. Production of SAF has and does exist commercially today through the HEFA process. About 70% of our fuel for commercial use in the SAF market is coming from fats, oils, and greases. But we're also seeing new technologies like alcohol to jet make headway. There is a huge market demand, and I think that it is really driven right now by the voluntary markets in the US because of the airlines' interest in this space, but also the mandatory markets in the EU and other countries which are requiring the use of sustainable aviation fuel. The SAF Grand Challenge established a 3 billion gallon goal. We have capacity announced at 3 billion gallon levels, but this would actually represent $44 billion worth of investment. So as a liftoff goes, this has been significant in that short period of time. But there are a number of things that really need to be kept there and in place, and that is the stable policies, the continuation of the mandates for foreign countries, the continued commitment of the airlines. All of this is necessary if we're going to continue to grow. You mentioned the progress report. Progress report goes a little deeper into details about volumes. This was put together by USDA, DOE, and FAA. And what we are seeing is that the domestic use of sustainable aviation fuel grew from 5 million gallons in 2021 to 93 million gallons in 2024. Only 26 million gallons was produced in the US. The other 67% was imported. That to me says our demand far outweighs our supply, and this is a true opportunity for the US to really move on this area and grow our volumes and production in this country.
Great. Thanks, Valerie. Before we move on to the next question, I neglected to remind folks that if you do have a question, please feel free to drop those in the Q&A section so that we can get to those as we go through. But if there's questions, that come out through the discussion, please feel free to put those in the Q&A. And Chuck, maybe building on some of the things that Valerie was talking about there, particularly sort of that demand and that demand signal from the chamber's perspective. What do you all see as the economic prospects for SAF, both on the supply and the demand side, and are there some challenges on financing or otherwise that we need to be addressing?
No, really appreciate that. And thanks to you, Kathy, and thanks to Bill and the OEP team for including the chamber in this discussion. Pleasure to be here with my fellow panelists, Tom and Valerie. Just quick background that as part of our growth and opportunity imperative for America, the U.S. Chamber called on Congress and the administration to support a pro-growth policies of at least 3%. And permanently extending the temporary business tax provisions of the 2017 tax cuts. And just that gives an overall perspective that while we oppose the IRA because of it included tax increases and price controls that were stifling for American investment and innovation, we also noted that they were part of the bill that would advance important energy security and climate goals. And like those tax policies enacted elsewhere, the chamber judged those things on individual merits and the best data available. And so SAF was in the mix there. We supported the blender's tax credit and the technology neutral approach. And we do think that because there are challenges of economics, basic economics, that demand is outstripping supply here in the US, that we need those incentives to get more offtake agreements, and refiners are not likely going to utilize their manufacturing capacity to help meet demand unless we're able to do that. The good thing about the chamber is that we represent all those interests, and I think the coalition that certainly Tom will talk about later does that as well, but we represent everyone from the airlines and the manufacturers to processors and refiners and producers. And so in trying to identify where those pain points are, we are engaging with all those folks to do that. Valerie talked a lot about the kind of the basics of the economics there, that their SAF continues to be 6% of the total renewable fuel production projected for going forward, and so really challenging to meet especially the climate goals that have been set in net zero carbon emissions that airlines are setting, but also in terms of overall approach to the transportation sector. Important that we get the economics of this right. And so the chamber, certainly committed to work with all the stakeholders across the various sectors to figure out what will work. And we think that that some issues regarding the incentives are going to be important going forward.
Great, thanks, Chuck. Appreciate that perspective. And yeah, the wide range of the chamber's membership, you certainly have a lot of key players who can provide a lot of helpful insights there. Tom, I think, and Chuck referenced this as well, that United has been active on SAF policy, and a leader in the SAF Coalition, which is a nonprofit group that's kind of really come together across the supply chain, more than 50 companies and organizations. What are some of the policy priorities or other priorities that the SAF Coalition is currently working on?
Thanks for that, Kathy. The SAF Coalition has been a great project and a labor of love for myself, and I know you have been very active in it as well. We have now more than 60 companies and organizations involved. Before I sort of get into the policy priorities, I want to talk 1 second about why United got into this, right? Valerie certainly touched on the sustainability goals, which is a big piece of why we care, right? Our customers want to feel like they're flying sustainably, and it's important to them. We think that it delivers value to our shareholders to the extent that we are more sustainable than our competitors. But we think about sustainability holistically, and certainly a key part of that is economic sustainability. And the real driver for our initial forays into sustainable aviation fuel was actually economic, and it came after the major recession of 2009, which was preceded by a massive global oil price shock, when the price of oil went from $60 a barrel in 1 month to $150 a barrel just a couple months later. Oil or fuel rather is United's #2 operating cost after labor. And just to give you some sense of what that means, we spent $12 billion on our fuel last year. So when the price of our #2 input triples, right, in a span of a couple of months, that's hard to do business in. You can't pass that all along to your customers. And we saw an enormous amount of either bankruptcy activity or M&A activity in the aftermath of those global oil price shocks. And so, what we're doing with sustainable aviation fuel is playing kind of a long game to hopefully mitigate our exposure to those kinds of volatile global oil prices. And by the way, also be cleaner and more efficient while we do it. And so, diversifying the feedstock from crude oil to a variety of potential things, whether it be corn ethanol like GEVO is using, or soybean oil like some other companies are using, or used cooking oil. Those are all part of the solution, or captured gases and some really exciting stuff that's probably a little further around the corner. Garbage was an exciting potential feedstock. These are all ways that we hope we can both clean up our operation and make it cleaner and more sustainable and better for our customers, but also hopefully over the long term mitigate some of that price exposure there. So that's why we're involved. We are, United likes to think of ourselves as a leader in this space. We did start out this coalition probably 5 years ago now as an informal group of companies that had aligned interest, and today it is now a standalone nonprofit, nonpartisan organization, more than 60 members strong and growing. And our key focus really is on incentives for sustainable aviation fuel. Last year, United used more SAF than any other U.S. airline. We're very proud of that. We pat ourselves on the back. 12 million gallons, twice the amount that we had used the year prior, and 3 times the amount that we'd used the year prior to that. Sounds a lot, right? But we used 4.5 billion gallons of jet fuel last year. So 12 million gallons out of that 4.5 billion total is not very much. And the reason it's not happening is because there's very small number of producers, and the costs for the fuel are currently still very high. That's often the way it is with new technologies, and so we think incentives are critical. And in the current law now does have an incentive that's applicable to SAF. This is the beloved Section 45Z Clean Fuel Production Tax Credit. It's less valuable than the credit it succeeded, which was the SAF Blenders Tax Credit, but nonetheless very important. What we don't have is the duration, and we really want to see a duration of tax incentives that matches the capital investment cycle for SAF, and ideally something in the line of 10 years. This credit will expire at the end of 2027. So our hope is that we can not only preserve this credit, but potentially extend it. And then if there's still appetite, we'd like to see some other changes too, which I'm sure we can get into later. But that's the one thing, the goal that really unites all these disparate interests within the SAF coalition that range from fuel producers to OEMs to airlines to labor unions, a really great conglomeration of interests, all focused on the rather narrow goal of extending and enhancing sustainable aviation fuel tax incentives.
Great, thanks, Tom. No, it's good to see, you're right, that broad value chain really, coming together and working together on some of these policies. Chuck and Valerie, I didn't know, want to give you all a chance to, and any input on federal policy priorities that helps support and scale SAF production, whether you're working on as a chamber or that DOE has kind of said, hey, here's some areas where some additional focus can be helpful. But Chuck, if you want to weigh in on anything policy priorities.
No, I can do that. Valerie, do you want to go first, or I can?
Or Valerie, yeah, either way.
I can go. So I would just mention 2 quick things I think that have been on our agenda, and because we have kind of that diversity of members looking for ways in which we can include and balance all those, thread the needle, as it were, for all those policy priorities. So one of them is eliminating the limitation on co-processing that's under current law. Our refiners, need the economies of scale to produce other kinds of fuels at these facilities, and so it'd be really helpful if that limitation could be eliminated. And then the other thing, and Tom references, is kind of the flexibility of feedstocks. Really important, given the fact that we have limited domestic production. We need the broadest range of feedstocks and technologies that are out there. Some of them are innovations that are to come. but certainly we need all the tools in the toolbox in order to make this work.
Great, thanks.
So I'll add in here first, I must caveat this with, we are in a transition with the new administration, and they have not fully developed all of their energy priorities yet. So I'm really speaking towards the executive orders that we have seen come out of the White House. And there are key real drivers in there for the continued development of biofuels. The energy emergency executive order, the growing our energy dominance, I forget the exact titles, but all of these talk about energy addition, increased domestic supply, really, and being competitive globally. And I mentioned earlier the mandate markets that the US can help fill. So we have very good reasons why sustainable aviation fuel is an important player in all of those. Again, the barriers and what the Bioenergy Technology Office does, which is technical in nature, are really critical, and get to some of the things that both Tom and Chuck spoke about. For example, the cost, 2 to 10 times higher to use a biomass feedstock. There is a wide array of different biomass feedstocks that can potentially be used. We have only just really scraped the surface there. And our research and development program is looking at all of those feedstocks, developing the pathways because of the diversity. That's a diverse number of pathways, and trying to work towards where these make the most sense based on the location of the feedstock and potentially the end use. And another way we look at what we're doing isn't just greenhouse gas reduction. Important, of course, but the economic drivers, rural development in this country really can flourish under a sustainable aviation fuel strategy, because the majority of these feedstocks are located in rural America or in the middle of the country. So that's an important value that this brings with jobs and everything else. But there are other things to value too. Avoided cost of waste. Landfills looking to avoid waste. Manure operations. Let's just talk about forest fire prevention. The LA forest fire cost this nation, taxpayers, the government, the state, $260 billion. By good, strong forest management practices and removal of the residues from the forest to produce sustainable aviation fuel, we could have avoided that cost and provided economic viability with the potential process. So there's a lot of work that goes on with the research we're doing, with how we're focusing in on these problems and trying to solve these problems with SAF as the solution.
It's a great point, and with one thing just to add is that hopefully this is a Farm Bill year. We've had 2 annual extensions so far, and addressing some of these underlying issues with domestic production and some of the issues that Valerie mentioned regarding wildfire management could be addressed in that process. And so every opportunity for us to think about what those policies might look like.
I just want to expand on something that Valerie mentioned, which is what SAF is SAF is biofuels, right?
Right.
But it's a new market for biofuels, and the market for fuel in aviation is growing, right? Because aviation, more people are traveling by air each year. Just a few years ago, less than 15% of the population, or only 15% of the population, had ever been on a plane. Now that number has increased significantly. That's here in the US. And think about it in India and China as those countries grow wealthier and want to see the world. So we expect our fuel demand to go up significantly. And what SAF is a market opportunity for U.S. fuel producers and U.S. feedstock producers. So our friends that currently sell corn ethanol into the gasoline market today, the demand for gasoline, while it's not decreasing yet. Is certainly not increasing the way that it once reliably did. And many forecast that it will stagnate and potentially decline and over time. You have corn ethanol, which is a very well-developed, mature industry in the United States with logistics and pipelines and all the kind of equipment you need. If we could take that and convert that corn ethanol into jet fuel, as companies like yours do, Kathy, we think that's a really exciting opportunity to power our aircraft with domestically produced feedstocks and fuels. And so that's the opportunity, that's the vision that we see, and I think it's a really compelling one. And a lot of those goals are shared by Congress and by the Trump administration.
And just
Great.
pull a little bit longer on that thread about how really these things interact with each other. SAF under the HEFA process is not the only fuel produced. Renewable diesel and naphtha are produced alongside sustainable aviation fuel. So as we learn to utilize biomass to a variety of different end use fuels, those markets can work together. What that'll do is support strong, reliable supply chains for the feedstocks, and that'll in turn reduce the cost. Add in their biochemical production. As the bioeconomy grows across this nation and we find ways to utilize these resources to produce performance advanced bioproducts, those come at a high value, and that can support the biorefinery and therefore lower the cost of the fuels as well. So it's really an integrated story of how to best use that resource to provide for all of our needs.
Great. No, thanks. A lot of good points there. I think we do, agree, certainly see a lot of opportunities by utilizing a wide range of feedstocks to address cost issues, and to ensure that fuels are competitive and cost competitive is part of that competitiveness going forward. And certainly agree with some of the points on policy. It's great to see biofuels recognized in these energy policies from the Trump administration, that biofuels are part of that, increasing that energy supply to meet the demand that you all are all mentioning and flagging that is out there. I guess connected to that, really looking at kind of feedstock production, through the getting that fuel all the way to the airports. What are some of the other actions? You have mentioned a couple of things, but really to improve those supply chains, from feedstocks all the way to getting that fuel on an aircraft. Those improvements through the supply chain address cost, help with the supply. But what are some of the things that you all see, improvements in that supply chain? Whoever would like to jump in first.
Well, I could speak just a little bit about the nature of our research program and our collaborations. We can't forget the importance of the U.S. Department of Agriculture in helping to establish the supply chains. And we work very closely with them. Understanding the wealth of feedstocks, and it's been mentioned, they're diverse. DOE publishes the billion-ton update on an every 5-year basis. And in our latest update, we've recognized that for use as energy feedstocks, we can have between 1 and 1.7 billion tons of available biomass. It comes in all different shapes and sizes. What we use today through agricultural crops and some residues to what we could use in the future, such as energy crops, which are purposely grown. They improve the soil, they improve farmer economics, but are grown specifically for the use of energy. And if we are able to accomplish that, we can produce over 60 billion gallons of fuel, which is more than enough for the aviation industry and the marine industry, who is also very much motivated by lower carbon fuels to meet international mandates as well. So that's the beginning. But then we have to really look at how do we access that. And it's different than the petroleum industry.
Mm-hmm.
They have very, very large refineries. Their fuel is energy dense, their feedstock, and it can be moved quickly and inexpensively. Biomass is different. but the research programs going on in Idaho National Lab, National Renewable Lab, and others are looking at how can we create energy dense intermediates from that feedstock and move them much like we would a petroleum feedstock. So the refineries can reach a certain level of scale, which helps reduce the cost, but also provide that fuel then in volumes that can be moved easily where the airports and airlines are. And then on the other end of the spectrum, where the fuel is produced, we work closely with our partners at FAA, and they have a huge focus on that infrastructure. How are we going to move that fuel from where it's produced to an airport where it could be blended and then utilized in the aircraft? So that makes up the back end of that supply chain. And they have programs that have funded work on helping develop that part of the supply chain. So across government now, we're looking at all the pieces and what it would take to make it a reality.
Great. Chuck or Tom, anything you guys want to speak to, in terms of, actions taken on, kind of through that supply chain, or things that you're working on, or Chuck, that your members are working on?
I would like to say that the supply chains are a really challenging issue, and present there's some tension between domestic and global feedstock producers, and so that we happen to represent all of them, and so that does create some issues when we're trying to figure out what the best approach might look like. So was kind of my interest in looking more flexibly in terms of what those feedstocks look like, I think is important. But we would certainly support, and that if we're talking about meeting the energy dominance EO, how do we ensure that we're onshoring that production?
I'll just say a few things. One, I have to acknowledge the great work that the Department of Energy has been doing on this issue for many years now, particularly Valerie's office, Bioenergy Technology Office, and the Loan Program Office, where they worked very hard to get a couple of loan guarantees out the door, and so I think those are really important elements that need to be sustained and are critical to U.S. competitiveness and leadership in this sphere. Second, to Chuck's point, United is a consumer, right? At the end of the day, we do have a ventures arm, United Airlines Ventures, that is going around and investing in some of these emerging fuel companies and technologies. We're very excited about that, and hopefully we will be able to make some money with those investments in the not too distant future. But we're an airline, and we consume. We're not really going to be in the fuel production business in a big way directly. So we don't care how you make it. We just want you to make it high quality, low carbon, and affordable. And so that's what's really important to us. And there's a lot of competing interests, as Chuck subtly alluded to, potentially between domestic feedstock producers. Like if you're growing corn or soybeans in the United States, you should only use U.S. corn and U.S. soybeans. And in general, that's what we want. That's what makes sense. It's close by. Those are the United States is where the bulk of our operations are. And of course, we would prefer to use fuels that are produced here, and fed by feedstocks that are produced here. But when you're dealing with biofeedstocks, sometimes you have a bad crop here in the United States, right? And if you don't have the access to global markets to be able to offset that, and you're a fuel producer, you're going to be in big trouble if your domestic source is shut off. And so I do think we need to be thinking about that in whatever policy that we make. We want to incentivize and emphasize U.S. Fuels and U.S. feedstocks, while not slamming the door on a integrated global market, because ultimately that is how energy works, right? And we fly all over the world. So that's one point. You know, overall, I'm going to go back to my earlier message. We need durable, meaningful incentives for producers. These are not things that directly benefit United Airlines. We want the fuel producers to have the incentives they need in place to be able to produce this. And it needs to be durable long enough for them to kind of start to toddle, right? You have a baby coming out of the crib, and then you at least want to get them the toddler phase, hopefully a little farther before you throw them out of the nest. It's critical, right, that for the United States has always led in energy, right? We led in coal, we led in oil, we lead in natural gas, and we do lead in biofuels. We invented these technologies here in the United States. We are advancing them better and more efficiently than anywhere else. But we're not alone now, and there's stiff competition in the international arena. We could easily lose our competitive edge to Europe, where they've got some rather draconian mandates in place, Asia, other markets where they are investing in this, if we are sort of penny wise and pound foolish when it comes to our energy policy.
Great. Thanks, Tom. Just another reminder to the audience to please, start thinking about any questions you have and putting those in the Q&A as we're not quite there yet, but we're headed in that direction. So just wanted to give everyone a reminder on that. I suppose maybe to kind of, bring together some of the points that you all have been making when we really think about, the opportunity here to, really stand up, a new, some new domestic production, new domestic industry, take advantage of U.S. innovation, availability of, agriculture production, very productive. That productivity keeps increasing, so we see opportunity for economic benefits, whether that's in agriculture or jobs or other areas. But sort of when you sort of look at this, this kind of SAF landscape, what do you see as, kind of that, that economic benefit for the United States and I think the importance of developing that here in our country, as like Tom said, as opposed to somewhere else.
Anybody want to start?
I have views, but I don't want to blab too much. I mean, I'll say that I think couple of things. It was once said that we couldn't drill our way to energy independence, right? And that turned out to be really not quite true, right? Because with the shale gas and shale oil revolution, the United States is now by far the world's largest energy producer of oil and natural gas. And that made a real difference to consumers in prices at the pump. But it wasn't just that side of the equation. On the other side of the equation is our cars got more efficient, and we also dramatically ramped up our production of biofuels, right? And the three factors came together in a way that has kept energy hugely more affordable here in the United States than it is overseas, right? And that makes a huge difference to our ability to recover economically after COVID and other kinds of, disasters like that. The United States economy is more resilient and stronger than any other country in the world, in no small part because of this kind of diversity of energy policies that we have that work hand in glove with each other. And this occasion is no different, right? Sure, drill, baby, drill, right? We do care about the cost of our conventional jet fuel, and we want sensible energy policies that affect that. But grow, baby, grow as well, right? We really need to have a sensible biofuel policy and sustainable aviation fuel policy in effect, and innovate, right? All these things have their own inefficiencies, a lot in the early days, right? Where biofuels don't quite live up to the promise and the vision that people might have said they would in the beginning. So we got to keep and strive for continuous improvement on that front. And so our fuel producers have to get smarter. Our crop growers need to grow more efficiently. Our logistics capabilities, as Valerie talked about, being able to collect the biomass, transport it efficiently, transform it into fuel efficiently. There's massive room for improvement in all of that, right? And in these early days, it is a public-private partnership to help ensure that that gets stood up and going in a way that sustains U.S. competitiveness and makes sure that we don't fall behind in this crucial case, which is energy, right?
And we need the kind of the continued market signals from federal policy that will help companies make those investments across the value chain in all the things that impact this. And to build on the energy security message, food security also, no one is more adept at being the breadbasket for the world than the United States. So the United States ag community. And so balancing the energy security needs with food security and the ability to grow those markets here, really important consideration. So I think these are all issues that we agree on.
And let me just say that, and I'm going to get the numbers a little bit wrong, so please don't quote me, but the U.S. today is the largest producer of biofuels in and around 43% globally. And a far cry behind us is Brazil in the 20%. We need to maintain that because we are really one of the most agriculturally productive countries in the world. And continuation of leadership in this area is going to help us maintain that global competitiveness and the economic benefits that come with that. And so we don't want to cede any of that if we can. And it's going to take this continued research, development, demonstration, and deployment activity for us to continue to grow in that area.
I agree, and it's all the integrating all that thinking together really fits the America First policy. That these are sectors and supply chains that are really important to the U.S. economy.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, it's an exciting opportunity, across the U.S. economy for growth, whether that's agriculture, we like to say food and fuel. We believe agriculture can do both and do it well. And then just the opportunity, right, to create new jobs across these industries. And, I think we have some export opportunities down the road too. I know we've got a lot of demands to meet, but certainly, keeping the U.S. in that competitive position, as you highlighted, Valerie, is important going forward. Okay. I am not seeing any questions just yet, but maybe we'll, before we, kind of transition, over to that, I think we've kind of covered a lot of the materials. Maybe just briefly, is there any kind of emerging, technologies or other, maybe just briefly, a couple of things that you might be watching closely that, something that's new out there, or something that you kind of want to flag that we should be keeping an eye on. Just quickly, Tom, anything?
Well, we're keeping an eye on you, Kathy, at GEVO and at LanzaJet. The alcohol to jet technology, which is the conversion of corn ethanol or ethanol into jet fuel. We think that's critical, right? We hope and expect that that could fulfill around a quarter of our future SAF needs. That industry is, the ethanol industry is well developed, as I mentioned earlier, from an infrastructure and logistics standpoint. The technology for converting it from alcohol into jet fuel has been demonstrated, but moving from demonstration scale to commercial scale is always tough in the fuel business. It's hard to make fuel, as it turns out, and it's expensive, right? And so We're watching that sector very closely and hoping for to see some exciting results there, and we think that's a key space to watch. And also on the feedstock side, continuous improvement in the agriculture side of things, very important. Another
Chuck,
one.
anything you've
Oh,
got
sorry,
your eyes
yeah.
on?
No, no,
I'm gonna, yeah, that's
cut
great.
me off there. That's
Yeah, anything you think we should be
Can't cut you off,
on
Tom.
from your perspective?
I would just say that another issue that I think you were alluding to was the importance of carbon capture, utilization, and storage as part of the production equation for refiners and others across the bioenergy discussion. And again, incentive. These aren't mature technologies, and so incentives are a key market signal that's out there, and many of our members across various applications support the 45Q CCUS tax credit. That can be
Thanks.
integrating that in.
And
Great.
now
And Valerie, what do you have your eyes on?
everything, but we are investing in all of the above. But I will say that, yes, utilization of existing infrastructure is one of the key ways we're going to reduce cost. And capitalizing on the existing ethanol industry is critical, as you've already heard. But now there's this thing called cellulosic ethanol, and it will always be the bane of my existence. How do we crack that nut? Well, we have a lot of great technologies that have come a long way, and they're starting to show promise in opening the door to cellulosic-based sugars, which can go on to ethanol. So that's a space to keep your eye on. And I'm going to add one more: co-processing, utilization of our petroleum refining assets, and how can bio-based crude oil intermediates feed into that story. And we have a very exciting group of the major petroleum refining companies working with us on what are the needs to overcome, the barriers, the research that needs to be done, so that they too can be producing sustainable aviation fuel by utilizing their assets. So that's another space to keep your eye on.
Great.
Yeah, thanks everyone, and sorry for the confusion there, Kathy. We've received a ton of questions, frankly.
Oh, good. I can't see them, so I was like getting a little bit worried. So I'm glad. I figured you would be, so that's great.
No problem at all. And the first one's not necessarily a question, but if you could just give an update on the Net Zero 1 project GEVO has, I think that'd be great.
Yeah, no, GEVO, we are continuing to to move forward on a couple of different projects. We did receive, I think, as Tom, as was noted, a conditional commitment from the Department of Energy Loan Programs Office for the facility in South Dakota in October. So I think continuing to work with LPO to move forward. And then GEVO is also working. Also, as these are all public announcements, so but also completed acquisition of an existing ethanol producer with on-site carbon capture in North Dakota last month. So looking at opportunities for additional alcohol to jet production sites as well.
Excellent. Thanks, Kathy. Valerie, this one's for you. On the commercial liftoff report, the question is this more of a working document that continues to get updated, or should we expect any reports like this in 2025?
I don't have dates for you, but it is a working document in that the groups combined are continuing discussions with how can we take the learnings from the liftoff report and weave them into additional work that perhaps we're funding or ways that we can engage the industry. So it has been an ongoing discussion with the authors, yes.
Excellent, thank you. And this one's for the panel. How do you see the EU or international policies affecting U.S. efforts with SAF?
Well, I'll say that I think I mentioned it before, that we are more of there's this carrot and stick concept. We're the carrot, they're the stick, but that stick is driving some very important export markets, which are economically needed for the business case being made in the U.S. for production. So the mandates do play a role in helping us further have market demand for the fuel.
Those are costly mandates, right? And we comply with them in the EU, where for those that don't know, they're straight mandates. You know, thou shalt use X% of your fuel will be SAF by certain years, and if you don't do it, there's a compliance fee, which is very high. And people comply with the law, right? So the demand in the EU is significantly above what it is in the US. It is, as Valerie said, a great export market. We'd like to see the production response really take off in the US. It's better to serve that mandated market, and for United and other US airlines that are serving that market, it's better for us to have our fuels and logistics partners be part of that solution than to be price takers on the other side. Ultimately, I don't think it's super great policy in terms of SAF commercialization. You wind up, when you have these really high mandates with no incentives to follow, sort of providing windfalls to those that are incumbent producers, and those that are seeking to perfect technologies and advance a little bit more slowly tend not to do as well. But that's probably a longer conversation.
Yeah, I would agree that we would rather see a more free market approach, and that it does tend to reduce innovation, and I think if you can get U.S. producers to step up, as Tom said, I think that would be helpful. But whether or not it's distorting the market or not, I think that's definitely a discussion to have over a longer term.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thanks for the feedback. Tom, we'll come back to you on this one here. What are airlines doing to impact passengers' behaviors or options when it comes to choosing a more sustainable mean of transportation?
I thought that question was going in a different direction, but no. So, when we launched, so we launched this ventures organization, United Airlines Ventures, and that invests across the technology spectrum in a variety of things, including like boom supersonic, into hydrogen, electric aircraft, a lot of things. But we did decide that we needed a more concerted focus and kind of a larger amount of money to focus on liquid fuels. And so we went out and solicited a number of limited partners and launched the Sustainable Flight Fund a couple of years ago. And that really focuses exclusively on the SAF space, not just fuel production, but all the kind of parts of the value chain that feed into that. And they're doing some really exciting investments. But I bring that up because when we launched it, we also gave our customers the opportunity. Like people used to sell these carbon offsets, right? That were typically operated by like an environmental organization like the Nature Conservancy or Conservation International, and you just pay money in, and you get what they call a carbon credit, right? And theoretically, that money was going to maybe stop Brazilians from cutting down the rainforest, or to use electric stoves instead of coal stoves in the Sudan or something like that. And we wanted to bring our customers into our journey a little more directly and give them the chance to be part of these exciting investments. And so we said, if you'd like to, when you buy your ticket, you can donate $1, $3, $5, $7 or more. We'll take as much of your money as you want to give us. And we use that money to invest in these emerging technologies. And the response was astounding. We have had several 100,000 customers contribute to this fund. And I'll be honest, I was skeptical. It was our CEO's idea, and I thought, is that really going to go? But we have actually raised a significant amount of money that is going into these things. So we're trying to, bring our customers along. We had a great ad campaign that we worked with our good friends at Sesame Street with Oscar the Grouch talking about potential, SAF and what it is and how you can turn different things, including garbage, into fuel, to get people excited about it, get them learning about it. And I think there's a real, we wouldn't be doing this if we didn't think our customers wanted it. And this really underscored the fact that they do. They have voluntarily added, money to their ticket price to be part of this journey with us. So it was real exciting.
Yeah, thanks for that. And apologies if you already spoke to this, Tom, but what blend of SAF does United use?
It does vary depending on the circumstances, but in general, I'll say this first of all, current regulations prohibit us from using more than 50% blends except on experimental flights. We have done some demonstration flights. We were the first one to do it with passengers with 100% SAF. But generally the FAA doesn't allow that. So we blend it no more than 50%. Typically it's 70-30 or 60-40 blends. And you do that. You don't want to get too close. You want your fuel to be on spec, right? To meet the specification. And you want to be well within that. And so that's typically what it is, but that could be adjusted depending on, specific circumstances.
Great, thanks for that. And we are at 12:58 here, so probably last question, and this one's for the panel. Could you give a little bit more detail about tax incentives needed going forward?
Softball. Durable, meaningful. That's the most important part. There's a ton of specificities to any tax policy that would blister paint because it's so boring. But the important part is how many years it's in effect. That is far and away, I think, the most important thing to stimulate new investment. A 1-year extension is important too, right? That ensures that existing producers can stay solvent and keep their operation running. So I don't want to discount that completely. But if what you want to do is stimulate new investment, new facilities, new jobs in the United States, durability is important. And, at least 5 years, but really, hopefully a little more like 10, which sort of matches the investment cycle, as I said. But the value of the credit is important too. If I had one criticism of the current 45Z credit, it has no floor. So the minimum qualifying fuel, which achieves the minimum level of greenhouse gas reductions, might only get 1 cent per gallon. That's not really meaningful, right? The bulk of the lower carbon fuels are, higher than that, 50, 60, 70% greenhouse gas reductions. But if we could get a minimum price floor in there in the way that its predecessor credit worked, that would be great.
The blenders is much more effective on that. And then to just underscore Tom's point is that the investment cycle, 1 year is 5 years. It's not 10 or 20 years. And so you need a longer runway in order to develop these innovations.
Well, I hate to jump in, and I don't know if it's a good thing or bad thing that we finished on the subject of taxes and tax incentives, but thank you to all 4 of you for that excellent discussion. I mean, Tom, Valerie, Chuck, Kathy, just an outstanding conversation on such an important subject. And I'm sure there are more questions. We'll let you know as they come in, but unfortunately we're kind of at the end of our hour, and we like to be punctual and make sure that people with their busy schedules can move on. So thanks so much. Thanks again to our co-host BP today, to our various partners, but mostly thanks to all of you for taking the time to join us. And I really would very much encourage you to visit our Energy Policies website, particularly the resource library, where there are additional materials on this topic. And of course, please join us for our next upcoming events, which we'll be letting you know about very soon. So thanks again to our panel for that outstanding discussion. For any of you who have friends or colleagues who couldn't make it for this live webinar, the recording will be posted on our website within a couple of days, so please encourage them to check it out when they do have the time. So I wish all of you a great rest of the week and look forward to seeing you again sometime soon. Thanks again.